Will honeybees thrive in a plastic hive body? According to some longtime beekeepers, the answer is an unequivocal no. Bees live in trees, not plastic bottles. While I think insulated hives have definite advantages for thermal regulation, especially in winter and the cool spring, they are not of much value if the bees reject them. I prefer knowing something is true rather than assuming it, so I've set out to learn for myself if bees will accept life in a plastic shell. In episode 1 of what will be a 3 or maybe 4 part series, I set up standard tin frame Langstroth wooden and Anel insulated hive bodies, each with a 3 pound package of bees and a carniolan queen. The premise behind this small study is that there will be a noticeable difference in how rapidly bees expand if they prefer wooden hive bodies over plastic. The plan is to follow colony strength and honey production through the July honey flow. Hello and welcome to my channel, CRB Honey. My name is Brad. My wife and I started a small honey business, Country Road Bees, where we produce and market the finest small batch and varietal honeys local to eastern Nebraska. If you appreciate a little science behind your beekeeping, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I made a pretty good living creating simple models of complex biological systems for fermentation processes. They weren't perfect, but did capture shifts at which times the process was at risk of failing. The first critical shift for a newly installed package of bees is when the bees that came with the package die off. The remaining population must be large enough to endure the loss of about 12,000 bees. The model predicts that bee populations will be constant for 28 days as the first cycle of eggs mature into nurse bees, after which the colony starts to expand. At about the 40-day mark, the bees that came with the package will die en masse, and the total population declines for about a week. There is an expanding population of bees that must be kept warm, so it is critical that the de novo nurse bees population be large enough to do the job. If not, the colony will either be set back and perhaps miss the honey flow or die off completely. The end of this video is close to day 28, so I am anticipating seeing more bees on more frames. Will I? Stay tuned to the end to find out. 7 days ago, I moved the 2 colonies to my friend's organic apple orchard. When I pulled in, I noticed that the apple trees, at least, the buds were swollen but not yet open. Walking up to the hive and just looking at the hive entrance for a while, there are a lot of bees flying in and out, several of them with pollen sacs, which is always a good indication that the queen is laying and brood is being raised. When I first opened the box, you could see plenty of bees present, but the colony definitely was not expanding. The queen had definitely been busy. You could observe a lot of eggs, a lot of larvae, and a lot of cat brood. The frames, as I'm flashing them on the screen there, were maybe 50 to 60% capped. So, it's still early. Not really expecting full frames of brood, but the queen is laying and the bees are healthy. I pulled the frame feeder from the bottom box and replaced it with 2 frames of drawn comb. Probably jumped the gun here, but for some reason I decided to add a second box. I was convinced that the colony was expanding and that it was the right thing to do. So added the second box, put the frame feeder in the second box, and as you can see, added another gallon of syrup. Turning now to the Anel hive, it too had plenty of bee activity at the entrance with a good quantity of pollen coming in. Going through frames one by one, as you can see, there's a good fair amount of cat brood, not quite as much as what I saw in the wooden hive, but still lots of eggs and expansion. But the colony just didn't seem quite as strong, so for whatever reason, I decided not to add a second brood box at this time. These ladies too had consumed all of their syrup, so I topped it off with another gallon of 0.8 to 1, one final inspection, and then closed up the box. I decided to keep this first little part in. What I'm doing is basically looking at dozens and dozens of small hive beetles leave the colony entrance. And small hive beetles are not usually something that is a concern for us in this part of the world. Notice how I shake the frame feeder and then place it back into the hive. The apple trees were in bloom and the bees had cut way back on the amount of sugar syrup they were consuming. I definitely should not have added that second deep. There was very little activity in the upper brood box, and all I did was add space for them to keep warm that they didn't really need to have. When you watch yourself on video, you learn all the things that you do wrong. Even though I'd quickly checked to see if the queen was in that top box, notice how I just set it down right next to the bottom box instead of putting it onto the lid like I should have. Digging into the bottom box, one of the things I noticed is that the bees were backfilling, so I was a little bit concerned about a honey dam. So you'll see later on that I did rearrange the bottom brood chamber a bit. But as far as the brood goes, quite a bit of cap brood, about 2.5 frames, almost 3 frames of cap brood, and the patterns were enlarging quite a bit, so they were filling out frames. The queen was filling out frames and they were getting capped. And there's probably another 2.5 frames of eggs, so a very healthy, happy colony. Just too much space. I should have left that top box off. You know the ladies are in a bad mood when I'm wearing gloves. I really do not like wearing gloves. However, April 27th was cloudy, a little cool, a little blustery, and yeah, the bees were not in a good mood. As expected, there was really no noticeable difference in the population of bees between the wooden hive and the Anel hive, but I didn't expect that because it's still too early for the new worker bees to start emerging. There were noticeably more frames of capped brood in the Anel hive. Not only more frames of capped brood, but the frames were better developed, meaning more coverage of capped brood and a considerable amount of uncapped larvae and eggs as well. Between the amount of brood and the amount of nectar and resources coming into the hive, I'm really glad I checked it today. The bottom box was becoming quite crowded. I did rearrange some of the undrawn frames just to encourage it to be drawn, but definitely time for a second brood box. I don't think I've mentioned this in any of the previous videos, but I have learned it's really important to keep a top vent open on the Anel cover. If not, these hive boxes seal so tightly there will be condensation forming. The best way to describe the temperature anyways over the last 30 days is, well, very much average. We've had very few really warm days that are approaching record highs and equally no days that are anywhere close to record lows. It's been a very mild and pleasant, yeah, April and May. So what have we learned through the first 21 days? As the model is predicting, there is yet to be any expansion in either colony of the bee population. It's just too early. It's going to need another 7, 8, 9 days before there's a lot of bees that are emerging. The premise of this video was to determine if bees would accept life in a plastic-bodied hive. The hypothesis was built with the assumption that the bees would actually do better in the wooden over a plastic hive. Even though it appears that the bees are doing better in the Anel hive than they are in the wooden, keep in mind this is a very small sample size. If you made it this far, well, first, thank you for watching. If you want more information about Anel hives and you live in the eastern part of Nebraska, please go to our website, countryroadbees.com, and click on the Anel pull-down tab. You'll also find our contact information there. If you don't live in eastern Nebraska, please visit Southeast Bee, where you can find a dealer near you. In the next video, we'll pick up where we left off, and that is at day 28, which I believe is actually day 32, thanks to a fishing trip and some inclement weather. Then we'll go into day 40, and we'll see what happens from there. Again, thank you for watching.